Midday, the 9th of August, 1965. The Prime Minister of Singapore is about to announce his country's independence on live television. It ought to be a time of great celebration, but not in Singapore.
For me, it is a moment of anguish because all my life.
Why was independence seen as such a disaster? Why was Singapore so reluctant to assume the mantle of nationhood? The answers lie in the island's unique history. In the first half of the 20th century, it was convulsed by the trauma of a world war and the two great political forces of nationalism and communism. Its people, who had come to the island to make money, were drawn into a struggle for the island's future. This propelled Singapore on a journey to independence that no one expected, and few believed it would ever survive. The idea that Singapore could become an independent nation-state was inconceivable 100 years ago. By 1900, Singapore's port had made it one of the most cherished outposts of the British Empire. In just 80 years, it had been transformed from a swampy jungle clearing into the world's 7th busiest harbour. The British had created the boom town, and their right to rule went unquestioned. Indeed, many local businessmen and community leaders openly helped the British with the day-to-day running of the colony. In July 1901, some of them were invited to Singapore's town hall for the social event of the year. The local elites typically came from Malay, Indian and Chinese families. Many had been working with the British for generations.
These people were very happy to be of service to the British because they didn't expect to take over or to be leaders. They were not nationalists in that period. So the relationship was a very comfortable one.
The wealthy and well-connected had gathered to watch the first ever cinefilm to be shown on the island. Footage from the funeral of Queen Victoria, mother of the empire.
Hardly anybody could remember a time when Victoria had not been on the throne in England. And so it did symbolise the end of an age, and particularly coming about the turn of the century as well. This was the death of somebody who symbolised what the empire and the growth of the empire and the growth of the trade and the growth of Singapore's trade meant.
But out on the streets of Singapore were thousands of recent arrivals who had never even heard of Queen Victoria. Drawn by the chance to make their fortune, some came from elsewhere in the Malayan archipelago, others from India and the Middle East. But most came from China and headed for Singapore's Chinatown. It was here that the island's unlikely journey to independence would begin. Many came here to escape famine and civil war in mainland China. They found work as labourers, noodle hawkers and rickshaw coolies. Among men such as these, the first sparks of nationalism would flicker to life in Singapore. But few had any plans to put down roots, for the time being.
Chinatown in the early 1900s would have been packed by Chinese immigrants. Their allegiance was not to Singapore. Singapore was a workplace. Their allegiance was to their hometown or home villages in China.
Despite this, by 1900, the number of Chinese swelled to a level that has remained unchanged to this day. Racially, Singapore was nearly 3/4 Chinese. But geographically, it was an island at the heart of the Malay world. In the turbulent decades ahead, people would be forced to question their loyalties. Where was home? China, Malaya, or Singapore itself?